Yes, there are many things about this that trouble me, but first, you know, when I look at this, you say you hadn't seen this report, and I've read through a number of these items that McKinsey pointed out in the report that they were telling to somebody in CMS, around you, over you, under you, somewhere. But these are things that should have been just basic testing requirements. You know, I used to write software. I actually wrote test plans for software rollouts, and you know, in fact, many of these are just basic common sense things you do. I mean, if we made one line of code change, we literally would test that over and over in multiple ways, let alone major changes. What this report talks about is chaos at CMS. Nobody's in charge. They talk about the fact that you had multiple people that were making multiple changes and major design changes to the system just weeks prior to the testing. I mean, prior to the rollout without testing it. I mean, did you have a test plan? Whether or not you read this report, these are things that you should have been doing anyway. I mean, were y'all making changes, big changes all the way through, and were you testing any of those changes, or just saying, well, you know, they told us October 1st, roll it out no matter what?
You've asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So let me try to recall how to address them. I think that certainly, yes, if you had this experience in software development, you need to have solid requirements before you can actually have good test cases in which to actually run tests. I think it's a dynamically changing environment of which, if we had more time, and that time would have been devoted to solidifying requirements that are translated from policy.
We had 3 years. I mean, there were 3 years. This isn't something that just kind of got plopped on your desk. I mean, the law passed and was signed into law in 2010. There was a lot of time to prepare for it. The requirements, major requirements, were changing weeks before, some of them for political reasons by the Obama administration. So you can't just say, well, you know, we just didn't have enough time. I mean, somebody in CMS, and if it wasn't you, it was maybe Ms. Tavenner, who knows who it was, but somebody was making all these changes and saying, gee whiz, I mean, you know, let's make big changes and don't test it because we just want to roll this thing out no matter what.
Well, having written software or written test cases, you know that the requirements come from the business side or the policy side, and they're subject to change based upon how your customer or your business.
The law didn't change. The law was passed. And for 3 years, that law didn't change. The law was there. You knew what those requirements were. Now, if you make changes in the requirements, you also ought to make changes in your test plan.
I think the law is a very high-level expression of requirements that certainly you can't develop code or test cases from. There needs to be a significant amount of translation into lower-level details. And that's what I mean by a scheduled challenge, is that we have to receive those requirements and translate them into test cases, test data, to exercise the system, and as well as build the system too. So,
look, they talk in this report that the contractor received absolutely conflicting direction between the various entities within CMS. Conflicting directions within CMS. That's not, a requirement change. That's one person saying do this and another person in the same agency saying do something different. And by the way, none of that's being tested in the meantime. That's not evolving requirements. That's chaos within the Obama administration, where they're literally changing things and multiple people are changing them and nobody's talking to anybody.
I can't speak to how they characterized it, but I think that in CMS we have Medicaid and CHIP requirements. We have insurance exchange requirements, oversight requirements, medical loss ratio, rate review, early retiree reinsurance.
And I know y'all have all that. Look,
there's lots of
you've got jobs. The bottom line is, you know, this report lays out the chaos that was going on, but all of this information was known within the White House. Reports were being briefed to people in the White House, and either President Obama didn't know about it, in which case people directly under him knew that this thing was going to be a disaster and just didn't tell him, or the president did know about it and went out misleading people anyway. But either way, if the president really didn't know about this, this report says the White House absolutely knew what was going on, and they didn't tell the president. He ought to be firing these people today. If a CEO went out there and said, I'm rolling out this project, this would be just like buying a TV on Amazon. That's what the president said. And if somebody right underneath him knew that it wasn't going to be like that, and this report says absolutely they knew, and they didn't tell the president, he ought to go and fire every single one of those people right now and hold them accountable. Or maybe that just says that he did know about it. And we'll see what the president says, but this report's damning. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Time's expired.